Michael Popok, Legal AF, with some deep dive and analysis on the new superseding indictment against Donald Trump for 4 counts of election interference and obstruction of an official proceeding in D.C. Yep, that's right. A brand new grand jury of about 20 people or so have also found Donald Trump is more likely than not, more probable cause than not, to have committed 4 federal crimes. This is news. This is not the old grand jury in the District of Columbia 2 years ago issuing the indictment that was the subject of the Supreme Court ruling on July the 1st. This is a brand new grand jury. No overlap. So this now answers the question. So smart, so cunning on the special counsel's behalf. Special counsel here, not troubled by judges like Judge Cannon finding him to be imaginary and not being an appropriate special prosecutor at all. And what he asked for, we now know why Jack Smith asked for 3 weeks more from Judge Chutkan in order to fashion and formulate his position about the immunity decision by the Supreme Court on July 1 and how it mapped onto this indictment, because he had no intention of using the same indictment. While we were talk about a diversionary play. It's like the Statue of Liberty play. While we were over here looking at the September 5th extended new hearing in front of Judge Chutkan to put the case back on its wheels, Jack Smith was over here impaneling a new grand jury that got snuck under the radar, presented all the evidence again to the new grand jury, and the new grand jury just issued this new superseding indictment, amending, if you will, the indictment from a year and a half ago. What is the headlines? You've heard the headlines. Let me tell you straight. They have, of course, mindful, the Department of Justice and Special Counsel, mindful of the instructions of the United States Supreme Court in its 6-3 majority decision in favor of Donald Trump, did a couple of things. One, they got rid of Jeff Clark. Remember that guy who was about 5 rungs down in the hierarchy of the Department of Justice when they weaponized the Department of Justice, Jeff Clark, and they tried to use Jeff Clark, Donald Trump did, to send bogus letters around the country to battleground states asking them to delay the certification of the election because the Department of Justice found fraud when they hadn't. Well, he's been removed from the indictment. No shock, no surprise. The Department of Justice had to do that. Supreme Court said point blank, Jeff Clark and the Department of Justice allegations about the weaponization of the Department of Justice have to be removed because they found absolute immunity for core constitutional conduct by Donald Trump. Okay, he's out. And that's why when they list the original 5 co-conspirators, 1 is now missing. It's co-conspirator 1, 2, 3, 5, and whatever. 1's missing, and it's Jeff Clark. Giuliani's still there and prominently displayed within this new grand jury, new indictment. John Eastman, the half-baked constitutional scholar, presidential scholar, is still there. Boris Epshteyn, private lawyer for Donald Trump. John Eastman, private lawyer for Donald Trump. Rudy Giuliani, private lawyer for Donald Trump, all still there. Ken Chesebro, private lawyer for Donald Trump. Why does it matter? Because the Department of Justice also took pains, and I'm going to read you from aspects of the new superseding indictment from yet another 20-person grand jury in which they took special pains to make sure that the Judge Chutkan and ultimately the United States Supreme Court realized this was private conduct by private lawyers working privately for Donald Trump, meaning it's outside official conduct that's given the presumption of immunity and outside core presidential conduct that gets absolute immunity. It should be in the private conduct that's not immune from prosecution. That's their argument. And they also went and took pains to let ultimately the Supreme Court know that they know how our government works and that the United States president does not have a role in the certification of the election, especially one that he's running in. Right? He's not a constitutional officer. The vice president, as president of the Senate tempore, has a role, Pence did, in certifying the election results and did. But the president doesn't have any role. And therefore, it can't be a core presidential power. It can't be a core presidential power extended, official conduct extended to its outer boundaries. And it can't be a presidential conduct that's allowed by the Constitution. Has to fall again into the bucket of private conduct that's completely prosecutable. I love this superseding indictment for so many reasons. One, that he did it sort of on the down low. He impaneled a grand jury. He presented evidence to the grand jury. He had them return an indictment, and nobody knew about it until today. That's gangster. Okay? Now, when they go in on September the 5th, before Judge Chutkan, they're traveling on a new indictment. Now, that also means, likely, that the case is going to be delayed. Because now, even though most of this, except for some tweaks here and there, and some new paragraphs and some shaving of some other paragraphs, it's primarily the same notice to the same defendant for the crimes that he's alleged to have committed and the same 4 counts, there is an argument that this indictment is substantially new, or at least new enough that Donald Trump has the right to both move to dismiss it, and we'd have motion practice up to the Supreme Court on that again. Have you heard that the flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking? It's a whole new movement towards better habits, led by the sponsor of today's video, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device, and flavored air isn't like vaping. If vapor was compared to sticky soda, Fume cores are closer to herbal teas. Fume has lots of delicious flavors to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. With flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, vapor, or combustion. Instead, Fume draws flavor to your mouth. Fume fills the void ditching a bad habit can leave. There's no vapor, and you can use it anywhere. There's no nicotine, and it's not addictive. The non-toxic flavors are a guilt-free alternative. Fume doesn't use any batteries, so you'll never need to charge it. The design is super sleek, it looks awesome, and you can truly feel the weighted, high-quality design. I mean, one of the fun things about Fume is that it's made to fidget with and calms anxiety with magnets, snaps, and clicks. Fume continuously invests in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products. My favorite Fume flavor is the orange vanilla. It's just as delicious as it sounds. And look, if you're trying to kick your bad habit, I couldn't recommend Fume enough. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code LEGALAF to get a free gift with your Journey Pack. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com, and use code LEGALAF or scan the QR code on the screen to get a free gift with your order today. So I had said, just to be clear and to be frank, I had said in earlier hot takes and on Legal AF on the MeidasTouch network that I thought he was going to just stand on the indictment and he wasn't going to supersede it. I did say that because I didn't think he'd want to have the delay that comes from a superseding indictment. Now, I know he's going to argue in court that this is essentially the same indictment. Same counts, same guy, same co-conspirators. They dropped a few, and therefore there shouldn't be any additional delay. But we'll have to see what Judge Chutkan does. I could see her giving Donald Trump additional time to file the motion to dismiss against this indictment. He's got to be shooting at the right indictment. And then there's appellate practice at the D.C. Court of Appeals and at the Supreme Court after that. That could happen. We'll know more on September the 5th. But let me read to you from the indictment itself. And it's particularly all the times where they stuck in the words private, private lawyer, private lawyer, private lawyer, president doesn't have any role. Why? And a lot of emphasis on the false, fake elector certificates, because that's their ticket to the prosecution. That is what was really left for them in the Supreme Court decision. Because even the Supreme Court 6-3 said if there's fake evidence, falsely manufactured and created, which gets in the way of an official proceeding, that could satisfy the counts under 18 U.S.C. 1512 for obstruction of an official proceeding if there's false evidence used. So there's a lot of false evidence layering in those allegations into this superseding indictment. A lot of private conduct being layered in and the removal of Jeff Clark. If you ask me, in an elevator speech, Popok, tell me what happened in the superseding indictment. That's sort of what I would tell you. Now, let me read to you. They still have the same basic framework. They go through the battleground states and all the terrible things that Trump and Giuliani and Powell and Eastman and Boris Epshteyn and others did in Arizona, in Michigan, in Wisconsin. That's all there. But you also have a lot of references to Donald Trump doing personal, private things. On paragraph 14, when they talk about Trump using his Twitter account They say now, throughout the conspiracies, although the defendant sometimes used his Twitter account to communicate with the public as president about official actions and policies, he also regularly used it for personal purposes, including to spread knowingly false claims of election fraud, exhort his supporters to travel to Washington on Jan 6, pressure the vice president to misuse his ceremonial role in the certification process, and leverage the events at the Capitol to unlawfully retain power. That's all Donald Trump qua private conduct, which means that should be prosecutable even under the Supreme Court's July 1st immunity decision. Same thing in paragraph 15. They talk about the political rally on the Ellipse as being that morning in paragraph 15, the defendant gave a campaign speech at a privately funded, privately organized political rally held on the Ellipse. That's how they're calling it there. And there's a reason for that, for sure. Now, let's go over the other places. They go through all the same pressure campaign by Rudy Giuliani on the Arizona Speaker of the House and all the attempts to hold fake legislative hearings. But they really drill down on and lean into the fake elector certificates, because I think that's what they have to do after the Supreme Court decision. Let's just go particularly to paragraph 67. And this is where the rubber meets the road about the DOJ telling the Supreme Court ultimately that Donald Trump, as president, had no role in the Jan 6 certification and therefore shouldn't be given any official conduct immunity as a result. Here's what they said on paragraph 67. As the January 6th congressional certification proceeding approached and as other efforts to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function failed, the defendant, Trump, sought to enlist the vice president, Pence, to assist in the plan to use his role as president of the Senate to fraudulently alter the election results. There's the fraud in the use of the certificates and the like. The defendant, Trump, had no official responsibilities related to the certification proceeding, but he did have a personal interest as a candidate in being named the winner of the election. And all the conversations between Trump and Pence was about Trump maintaining power. These are all private conduct, meaning not immune. That is what, that's what they're telling all the courts at the appellate level here. But by and large, I would say about 85 to 90% of the schematic and framework or blueprint of this indictment superseding, even though brought by a new jury, just goes to show you, by the way, the overwhelming power and overwhelming persuasiveness of the evidence against Donald Trump that a separate second grand jury indicted him on the same exact counts for the exact same thing involving most of the exact same co-conspirators. So now if I'm Jack Smith on the 5th, and he'll do it in some papers that he's going to file this week, I would say, as everybody knows, we filed a new indictment with a new grand jury. And it is primarily and essentially the same at its essence, at its core. And there shouldn't be any delays, and we should be able to go to trial. It now just comports and complies with the Supreme Court decision. Nothing to see here. Let's get this case going to trial. The counter argument to that we're going to see from the Trump side, which is, this is a whole new indictment. We got to start all over again. Wind the clock back. We have to go back 2 years. And now we got Judge Chutkan who's going to have to make the decision, and ultimately the D.C. Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. But we're going to be tied up in courts about this new indictment moving forward. Somebody's going to, the losing end, is going to take an appeal, an emergency application, first to the D.C. Court of Appeals and then to the United States Supreme Court. And we're going to see it break out in fireworks, coming up on this Labor Day. There's going to be a lot of filings over this weekend and into early next week. And we'll file it all and follow it all right here on Legal AF at the intersection of law and politics. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.